Now, I would love to get started to be able to introduce our fabulous, great panels. And I'm actually going to start with our superintendent.
Thank you so much, Carla. My name is Stephanie Elizalde, and I am truly the proud superintendent of Austin Aisd, and I'm extremely humbled and honored to be able to be a part of this team, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to increase the opportunities for engagement, even during these challenging times of COVID. So thank you so much. And before I go, because I'll forget later on, I know in this instance, I speak for everyone, whether they're listening in, watching, or participating from the panelists. We thank you. We thank all of our community engagement individuals. We thank our interpreters, and really appreciate the fact that it allows us to truly provide access to all of our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. Next up will be our Chief Academics Officer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Elizabeth Casas, glad to be here with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Then we also have our Chief of Schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Mays, glad to be a part of the conversation this evening.
Our Equity Officer.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation. Stephanie Hawley, Equity Officer.
Our Chief Technology Officer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sean Brinkman, Chief Technology Officer. Thank you for taking the time to participate this evening.
Our Chief of Police.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ashley Gonzalez, Chief of your Police Department. Excited to be here.
Our Chief Human Capital Officer.
Leslie Stevens, thank you all for being here. Chief of Human Capital.
Our Chief Officer of Intergovernmental Relations.
Hello, my name is Jacob Reach, and I'm excited to be here with our Bowie and Akins vertical team.
Our Executive Director of Innovation and Development.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Wallace. Thanks again for making time to be here tonight.
And lastly, our Chief Operations Officer.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matias Segura, and excited about the conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone. We know right now is the end of the school year, or we're approaching the end of our school year, and I'm sure that's on top of everyone's mind. And so, Dr. Mays, can you tell us a little bit about what at the end of the year is actually going to look like?
Sure. So, of course, we are approaching our normal routines of graduation and celebrations, and so we are looking forward to hosting face-to-face graduations for our students. And so, of course, we will be modifying graduation simply because of maintaining safety measures due to COVID-19. And so May 28th through June 3rd, we'll be hosting outdoor graduations at our athletic stadiums, where we'll be conducting temperature checks, maintaining social distancing. Students will be able to bring at least 4 guests to those events. We're also working on, or I believe communication about prom has gone out, and so we'll have a combination of indoor and outdoor proms to try to make sure that students are operating safely. But we want to make sure that we have, again, those rites of passage in place for our students, but we want to make sure that we do those in a safe way.
Thank you, Dr. Mays. And I know as graduation comes approaching, I'm sure a lot of our parents and families and community members are going to start thinking about what is going to look, our next school year is going to look like, especially at the end of this pandemic. And so we wanted to know a little bit more about, as we prepare for next year, what can we expect for summer sessions and overall next year? So Dr. Elizalde, can you speak to that?
Thank you so much for that. We know that as we have worked as a community to do everything we can to mitigate the challenges of COVID-19, this has also brought us an opportunity as we're moving towards the planning of the new school year to enthusiastically say we are planning for what I'll call a more standard face-to-face instructional delivery model for our 2021-2022 school year. One of the questions that I get often, one of the many, is will masks be required? Masks will be required as long as the Center for Disease Control say that masks are necessary. Then we absolutely will continue to follow all of those safety protocols. But I know that there will be a larger number of students who will be requesting and looking forward to that face-to-face engagement on our campuses. And we know that slowly but surely, we will be able to move to expanding what we consider our more traditional activities that are part of our experiences on our campuses that lead to those graduation and prom moments at our Bowie High School, go Bulldogs, and at our Akins High School, go Eagles, So we know that those are important opportunities, and we want to welcome as many of our students face-to-face as possible. We know we have had a wonderful turnout of our staff receiving vaccines, but we also know there'll still be some concern with regard to the fact that vaccines we don't know whether those vaccines for under 16 will be readily available, if available at all. So we'll continue to follow the science as we have this entire year. And in addition to that, we are planning a type of virtual instructional model. It may include 1 or 2 days of face-to-face. However, we know that there are some students that have benefited from us learning about virtual instructional delivery models. And so we want to have our teams continue to work to develop what that will look like. Now, we don't know exactly what that'll look like for a couple of reasons. One, we know that we need to have our campus leaders be the ones that are part of that design. So our Chief Academic Officer, Elizabeth Casas, will be working with Dr. Anthony Mays, along with our campus leaders, to ensure that it reflects what the needs of our students are. The important part of this is we are absolutely committed. And I want to go in this instance one step further. I am absolutely committed to ensuring that we do not ask or expect teachers to do a simultaneous instruction of both students that are on Zoom and students that are in the room. That has been an extremely challenging expectation, and our teachers, with the support of their campus leaders and support staff, have just continued to meet that expectation, but we know that that is not sustainable. And so in order for us to be even more successful, we will be asking families who may be choosing the virtual option to do so for a minimum of 1 semester. That way, our principals can create schedules that will have teachers that would be dedicated to a virtual delivery versus a face-to-face on-campus delivery. So it's going to be very important that we communicate, we know, early on with our parents. The second challenge with the virtual design, of course, is what exactly is it that the Texas Education Agency is actually going to approve, and what are they going to fund? But we know it's important enough that we want to begin the planning of that process prior to that. So a lot to look forward to, and a lot of success.
You have everything on.
And so we'll be able to move forward together. It's really important that we work at this point with people support what they help to create. So the more involvement, as we can see right now, there's 65 participants. I really appreciate people taking time to come listen in and to ask us some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. So at this time, we're actually going to open it to our community, our staff, as well as anyone who has any specific questions before we proceed. So if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. So as we wait for our participants to collect their thoughts, there is actually a question that was submitted by one of our registrants. And their question was, how will virtual teachers get selected for next year? And what are the guidelines and responsibilities of that virtual teacher?
That question is exactly one of the ones that I know that both Dr. Mays, Ms. Casas, and I can see our principals on here that would be like, let's all be involved in that process, because we want to make sure that we are setting our teachers up to be successful. And so we do want to create a profile of the design for the teacher who will be delivering instruction in a virtual setting. So I can't give you any specific information, but obviously it will include things like the ability to engage utilizing technology, accessing curriculum resources, utilizing technology. And it's one of those where I know that our staff will be asking teachers to give us feedback on what should that particular teaching design, if you will, for that particular instructional delivery look like. So thanks so much for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. I don't see that we have any current questions, so I'm going to move on to the next section. But again, oh, actually, we did get a question. So let me briefly just read that. This question comes from...
We're switching to the second interpreter.
Thank you for that. Our question is there a target date to get the 21-22 AISD starting and end dates for calendars out to staff? So is there a target date to get the 21-22 AISD starting and end dates for calendars out to staff?
I think Ms. Stevens will probably be able to respond to that. And I'm going to make an assumption here that we're talking about those start and end dates for those outside of since the calendar has already been approved and communicated. I believe the question is about, like, if I'm a teacher, when do I actually have to report? Or if I'm a principal, when do I have to report? Ms. Stevens, do you have something to add?
We will have staff calendars out most likely mid-May. We're working on a few adjustments, but we will be getting those out and published.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question is, depending on the number of students per grade level at a campus requesting virtual learning, would the district consider having a virtual teacher work across campuses? How might that impact enrollment?
That is absolutely, the answer is yes. So what we would like to be able to do is not to have to say no to a family, right? And so that may mean that, especially if they're not actually reporting except for 1 or 2 days out of the week, depending again upon the model, if we have 4 students in 2nd grade at school A and we have 12 students of that same grade level at school B, we will want to work together so that it would be one teacher that would be providing that instructional delivery to those students. Now there's a lot of like, okay, are those students, do they belong to this school or do they belong to that school? So there's some of those technical specifics that we'll still have to work out. Again, so much of that being dependent upon the Texas Education Agency or TEA. But the short answer is yes, we want Austin to continue to be the one that is different from everybody else. We will meet students where they are. We do not want to be rigid. We do not want to say, you have to have this many students in order for us to offer that classroom. And so it's going to take a lot of work on our part. We're going to be asking a lot of you to help us out because it's going to take a lot of that Austin creativity in order to make that a reality. But I want to emphatically say, yes, that is the intent. And that is certainly my expectation, but no pressure, principals.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. So we did receive a question about budget, and so we're actually moving on to our next phase of this discussion, and we are facing some budgetary challenges, especially with the compounded expenses associated with COVID-19. So Ms. Stevens, can you talk a little bit about how that's going to affect staffing plans and the campus funding in the next upcoming school year?
Yes, thank you. So this year, we looked at the current staffing formulas that were used for this school year, the 2021 school year. We also looked at, we are currently staffed for 80,000 students because that was the projection. At this time, we have 75,000 students enrolled. So we have a gap of 5,000 students from what was projected to what we currently have in our schools. Now, we are projecting for next year an enrollment of 77,351. And so we still have that gap between 80,000 and 77,000. So we looked at the staffing guidelines that were used, and when we took those same staffing guidelines and applied them to each school's projections for next year, we would have lost approximately 622 personnel off of our campuses. That includes, you know, teachers and APs and counselors and all of that. So we went back and we started, as you know, there is the whole underlying piece to our district framework on equity, and we have some values written around equity. We looked at what we value and rewrote our staffing guidelines to encompass some of those equity pieces, to account for those on a campus, so that we could take our greatest resources, which we know is personnel, our teachers, our counselors, our assistant principals, and all of that, and are trying to distribute those in a more equitable manner. So what we looked at within the staffing guidelines, like we provided extra weighting for special education students in a couple of positions, counselors and APs, due to the fact that there is administrative time in attending ARD meetings and getting out IEP information and all of that. And then for the teacher in the classroom, we looked at the number of economically disadvantaged students on a campus and weighted for those, so that a campus could decide by looking at their data, if we are struggling the most in English 1 and English 2, then we could take those extra FTEs and make those class sizes smaller. So those was the rationale behind what we were looking at in trying to do a more equitable staffing guideline for all of our campuses. And by applying those adjusted guidelines, we currently have between 225 and 250 personnel that we're over. So what we do is, as we meet with principals and they're making, you know, those decisions regarding their master schedules, which are based on what students choose, then they will go into a priority pool, and they will be in the priority pool because, as we all know, things happen. I mean, you may have a teacher retire or resign that you weren't expecting. And so if you have somebody in your priority pool that matches that certification, they'll come right back to your campus. About mid-June, July, if we don't have any at that time, we'll look at our vacancies and we will start putting, you know, our priority pool candidates into our current vacancies. We will not eliminate any current staff member, because every year we have a need for teachers. We hire between 600 and 700 teachers every year. So having 200 to 250 people in our priority pool is an advantage to our principals, because you're going to get an experienced teacher from the district, and they're also familiar with everything Austin Aisd. So there are no people who are losing their jobs over this adjustment in the staffing guidelines.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stevens. And to follow up on that question, Dr. Mays, can you tell us a little about how instruction drives the budget at both the campus and the district level?
Dr. Mays, I think you're on mute.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. And so going back to what I was saying, Ms. Stevens actually touched on quite a bit of this as she was sharing. It really is about the desegregation of the data that you have at the campus level, and working to collaboratively with your teachers, your PTAs, your campus advisory committees to look at the data, determine priorities, look at areas of need, look at some of the areas that we really need to strengthen. And so with that being said, you try to determine where do we need to allocate our resources? Where do we need to spend our money? Where are we having our challenges at? And where do we, designate that manpower, those resources that we're talking about in the form of personnel? A lot of times those conversations, again, they can take place at the campus level with those communities to try to determine, okay, as we look at this, what are we going to make a priority and what are we going to attack? We take a similar course of action at the district level as we look at some of the challenges across the system to try to make a determination as to where we're going to allocate our resources.
Thank you so much. So we're actually going to open up again for Q&A. So if you want to go ahead and put your questions in the chat, but we do have a question related to budget. So our individual asked, we've heard about budget cuts at other high schools. How will our campus budgets be impacted this year? And will we lose programs? And you addressed the staff question, but more so the programs itself.
So the intent is to truly have schools look at their choice sheets, what they're offering, and how many students pick those choices and work through their master schedule. And they are in the process of doing that right now. The intent is not to lose programs from a campus. And so I know our principals are working really hard on that. And it varies across each of our high schools. So in today's case, and I'll just use today as an example, we have Akins, who's gaining some teacher units, and we have Bowie, who's losing some teacher units. And so in those cases, each of those schools have different challenges. One is Akins trying to figure out where they're over in classes, and Bowie in what can we adjust in our schedule so that we can maintain what we offer to students as they make those choices. And so every single one of our schools is different. And I, like I said, our principals are working with their executive directors and school leadership, working through all of those specifics for a particular campus.
And let me just add, this is not about, there will be no program that is going to be reduced. There are 3 different levels of staffing guidelines. The first one is the one that we've just actually described. And I do want to just reiterate that the original guidelines that were here currently prior to my arrival actually did not, on the staffing side. First, I need to commend, and I see we've got George Goganas, and I'm not sure I said your last name correctly because I'm still practicing that, sir, who happens to be a Bowie graduate. That's not lost on me, and so is Matias Segura. That's not lost on me either. So we seem to have a lot of folks here. So that being said, I digress here. The budget office has always put in adjustments on the non-staffing side of our general operating budget for campuses for economically disadvantaged students. So with regard to access to equipment and resources, that actually has been part of the process. There was an equity component there. Now on the staffing side, that wasn't the case. So what we've done now is we've simply taken that equity approach that's already been there on the non-staffing side, and George and his team have actually just moved that over to the staffing side. So you take the number, not the percentage, you take the number of students that are economically disadvantaged, and we add a factor in of 1.2. So what we're actually doing is we're going to staff campuses that have, it's going to be staffed as if there are more students than you actually have in your projection, because we're utilizing that 1.2 factor into the denominator, the total number. And most people don't know this, and somehow we have done a really poor job of communicating that. The previous guideline that George's team was working with actually divided at the secondary level by 29 to 1. Our current guideline has actually reduced that to 28:1. So I want to continue to reiterate that most of the reductions are coming in the form of the fact that we have fewer students, and we're being very aggressive in saying we're going to recover at least 50% of those students, which is why we're planning on having at least approximately 77,500. I know both George and Leslie have that down to 77,300 and whatever, but I'm going to do 77.5. And so with that, no programs will be cut. So the first layer is this approach of let's have a guideline, let's have some equity involving economically disadvantaged being utilized as a proxy for creating some equitable distribution and staffing. And then there's going to be another level. That second level will be programmatic. So if at the end of our regular staffing, we do have our principals meet with their executive directors and it's like, there's no way I'm going to have to do this if I don't, so I really need X or Y, we're going to have a look at that. So we have the ability to still make some adjustments, but one of the things we know Austin ISD and Austin as a greater community wants is they also want us to, as Dr. Holly's been leading us through this work, they want us to start actualizing or operationalizing equity. So we've had a lot of conversations, and a reminder, I've been here not quite 8 months, and Dr. Holly, who's only been here like, what is it, 18 months, Dr. Holly? So you got to give us a little bit of time, but we're going to work towards operationalizing these things. And so I want to be very clear though, no programs are going to be cut. No students are going to not be able to be in band, are not going to be able to be in sports, are not going to be able to be in an early college high school, are not, that is not going to happen. And so we'll be able to continue working. And the last tier of guidelines for staffing is school performance. So if our schools are having higher needs, then maybe there's a different type of staffing that we haven't even thought of. Are there some support positions that are needed? Are there some connections with some outside entities or partnerships that we might need to connect? So there's a whole variety. So bear with us as we get through each of those layers of staffing guidelines as we move from one level to the next.
Thank you so much. Another question before we move on is, are non-classroom specific positions like reading specialists at risk for being eliminated at the campus level?
So we did review those positions as well. And I know we worked with the academics department. So what we discovered was there is a position, and I'm going to say it's called CULT on some campuses. It was reading interventionist at some campuses. It was interventionist at some campuses. So we looked at that whole bucket, and that whole bucket of personnel, and there's 123 of them across the district. We are renaming that role and refocusing those efforts on specifically a dyslexia interventionist position, which your CULT certification is a dyslexia interventionist. We're going to call them dyslexia interventionist, and those are going to be out of the academics department because they're looking specifically at the students who have been identified as in need of those services, and those will be allocated specifically from that department for that need.
So there may be reallocation. There may be a reallocation of those positions based on student need. But if someone is saying, am I going to have a job, even though I'm a reading interventionist here, the answer is you're going to absolutely have a position. We just can't guarantee that it's going to be at the campus where you may currently be. Same as we're doing with our teachers. Of course, our first option is always to maintain what we can. I did see very briefly something about if programs aren't being cut, what about a position at McCallum? So what I don't want to do is I don't want to have a conversation without the principal from McCallum here, but I will say this. These are all partnership decisions. We are decentralizing. We have some things that we're firm on, and we have some things that we're flexible on. And so principals have to have the flexibility to make decisions that are best for their campuses. And so I would encourage us to just visit and reach out to those individual campuses where you may see some changes, because there were some options available to all of our principals, and it's about how they prioritized and how they decided they could still meet all of the needs of their schools. Dr. Mays, did I capture that correctly?
You did, and I go back to, again, looking at the data and looking at those conversations at the campus level. Again, that community involves the principals, campus advisory committees, PTAs, any other stakeholder groups that are part of that campus. And so as you look at that data, as you look at that program, you do get to determine what the priorities are. And that's the process across all of our campuses. And those aren't easy conversations. Those are challenging. As you look at the needs, but it's based on needs and it's based on that feedback from that feedback loop that we have there. And
let me just share one last thing. Fine arts, visual and performing arts in particular, are extremely important. We know they're all important. We know it is important. It is an area which connects academics to enjoyment, real world expression, social emotional learning, and so on and so forth. But more importantly than that, it is an area that for me, it made a difference in my life. I studied classical ballet and flamenco dance for more than 16 years. So this isn't something that I'm thinking about abstractly. It is something that was really important and allowed me to be, I think, successful in high school, successful throughout my elementary, middle, and high school years. And it connected in so many ways to even the work that I do. So please know that it is very near and dear to my heart, whether we're talking sports, whether we're talking fine arts. As a matter of fact, most of our conversations have been about how are we going to ensure that we have access to all of these types of enrichment, which I don't know that they're enrichment. In many instances, they can be the core of our work, because in many instances, it is what makes coming to school connected to the things that they're doing. So we're going to work to continue to expand those types of programs throughout our entire district.
We will now be switching ASL interpreters to ASL interpreter 1.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for our leadership to provide those clarifications. Dr. Elizalde, being new to the district, we kind of want to know, what are some ways that you've sought to learn about Aisd team members and the community? Can you give specific examples of what you've heard that's informed your priorities and decision making?
Sure. Thank you so much for that essential question. I see a couple of folks here that even hosted me as I held some town hall meetings. Dr. Kaufman was one of the MCs for one of the times that I did a town hall, and Norma was one of the other MCs as I held some town halls. But in addition to that, during my first 90-day listening, learning, and launching entry plan, my goal was certainly to try to build as many relationships as I could. The biggest challenge being COVID, right? This isn't a place where I could just show up to a school. I could show up at Akins and say, hey, can we have a bunch of people just come in and let me just kind of do a meet and greet. Those things have been very challenging for me, as I'm sure they have been for all of you. So I did host a lot of one-on-ones through Zoom, as well as some group Zoom meetings. But just to kind of give you an idea of what the purpose was, I mentioned relationships. I also wanted to hear from Austin ISD and from the greater Austin community what they saw as our strengths, as our challenges, and our opportunities. In addition to that, I also wanted to see how could we help create an action plan that is aligned to the Board of Trustees strategic framework with our mission, vision, values, and priority focus areas. All of that keeping in mind that I knew that excellence and equity in education for each and every student was at the top of everyone's important list. So important that an Office of Equity was created, and Dr. Stephanie Elizalde was selected to lead that department. Now, true story, I got here and she kind of had like a department of one. So we kind of had to let her actually hire folks so that she could actually have a team to continue to build on that. But I visited with every member of our Board of Trustees. I visited, some of you were on here that I had some one-on-ones with, district and site administrators, faculty and support staff. I also met with individuals from our community like the mayor, county judge, some city council, civic leaders, community leaders. There were some church leaders that I met with. And so there's a list of 10 questions that I essentially ask every group or individual. And here were some of the themes. Transparency came across, I think, as the #1 issue that individuals said they wanted more transparency, more clear communication, that they also wanted equity, but they talked about equity in a really unique way. They said, we want all voices heard. And so that was another common theme. A lot of interest in expanding, continuing, strengthening social emotional learning, and recognizing and loving the diversity of our community. And that they also wanted us to have a focus on customer service. And could we also have a focus of alignment? They felt like there were a lot of things going very well, but that we were kind of bumping into each other sometimes internally, and that folks had a little bit of confusion with where do I go and who do I talk to. So those were just kind of a few of the items that came up. I hope that addresses that particular area, Carla, that you were trying to get me to.
No, it does. Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. And we talking about a little bit about equity. Dr. Holly, can you talk to us about what the Equity Advisory Committee is supposed to be all about?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. And Dr. Elizalde, would you tag team with me on this? Because I have to give credit to Dr. Elizalde for embracing the concept of an Equity Advisory Committee. We always wanted one, and she came in and embraced it and just really kicked it off in a huge way. And the idea behind the Equity Advisory Committee is that we are building bridges and strengthening our bridges with our community. But like all advisory groups, its purpose is to provide the district with some recommendations on how to strengthen equity. And so we have roughly 20 members of this committee, and we have 4 co-chairs. 2 of them are community members, 2 of them are staff members. We have students, teachers, administrators. And Dr. Elizalde, would you like to talk about our breakdown on our subcommittees? And not meaning to work you to death, but I just think you do such a great job of explaining this framework.
Well, I actually call this Dr. Holly's flower petal blooming, because I think it's a great design. And if you think about it, it's what we're doing. We're blooming in the equity work under the leadership of Dr. Stephanie Holly and her team. And so we've worked, I think really Dr. Holly did a great job of creating these subcommittees that are aligned. When you see student well-being and achievement, that's not there by accident, right? That's a priority focus area. Teacher and employee well-being, that's another area of our priority focus areas, along with culture and respect and customer service, and of course, financial stewardship and prioritization. And knowing that that work has to be done, being provided guidance through an equity assessment, which Dr. Holly is also leading that work. And the most important component is that it really has to be the community that's actually going to be a part of whatever this result is or these processes. Our community must be a part of this, and our education of what we've learned through this process.
Thank you. And just to close out on this this part of the conversation, our next meeting is April 27th from 5:30 to 7:30, and we welcome the district. Everybody's welcome. We had about 100 people in our last meeting, in the inaugural meeting last week, and I think we've got like almost 2,000 views on the recording. And so there's a lot of interest, and we just welcome everybody in the district to come to the conversation, sign up for a subcommittee, because everybody's rolling up their sleeves with the community to go to work. So excited about this work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holly and Dr. Elizalde. So the board had just adopted a strategic plan framework shortly before the change in leadership this past summer. And so we wanted to know, what are the next steps and process for the administration to develop targeted strategies and an action plan? Can you provide us with an update of where we are in that process? Ms. Wallace, if you can answer that question, please.
Yes, Michelle Wallace at the Office of Innovation and Development. And you're right, y'all may remember, although it feels like a long time ago now, that the Board of Trustees has developed and approved the strategic framework. They also approved a scorecard. The framework you see here, it includes the mission, vision, district values, and priority focus areas, with equity as a foundation for those focus areas that really comes through the work in each of the areas. Those focus areas really, begin with student well-being and achievement, teacher and employee well-being, culture of respect, customer service, and fiscal stewardship and prioritization. And right now we're working with Dr. Elizalde and our leadership team to develop the strategies and action steps that will help move our district forward in those areas. In that process, we're utilizing feedback from the community that we received last year, and also really working hard to work closely with Dr. Holly and the Equity Office and incorporate the feedback from all of their really, really thorough community engagement work they've been doing over the last year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Dr. Elizalde, can you talk to us a little bit about the strategic planning framework?
I'll be very brief, I promise, on this one. Taking that triangle, if you will, that Michelle Wallace just highlighted, we wanted to be intentional about the connectivity between our strategic framework, which informed our scorecard, and then our scorecard, which is, if you will, kind of our, and this is a district scorecard. This represents all of our work. This is not the superintendent's scorecard. It is the Austin Independent School District. It is the Austin Community Scorecard. It's about how all of us work to do this together, because none of us can do this by ourselves. But more importantly, how then are we going to accomplish this scorecard? If you will, if you will allow me a sports analogy, we want to get to the Super Bowl. Well, what's our playbook? What kind of an offense are we going to run? What kind of a defense are we going to run? I'm sorry, there were no boys in my family, so my father required me to learn about sports. So, what kind of a formation are we utilizing? That's really what the district improvement plan is. And we just started on creating those strategies for the 21-22 school year collectively with our team. And each of our teams are taking the 6 initial objectives that we've created, and we're going to work through those. And the most important part of that district improvement plan is that it aligns with our equity action plan. That these should not be 2 different things, but that in fact our equity action plan should be the processes, and that it in fact should inform our district improvement plan. So we're very excited about the fact that we get to continue to start with equity right now, instead of saying, here's our district improvement plan, and then thinking we're going to go take it over to the Office of Equity, and we're going to say, okay, you all look this over and tell us what this looks like and what we should or shouldn't have. Instead, we're doing this simultaneously. We weren't going to get it perfectly done, but we know we're off to the right start.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. So we're going to take this time. We have a couple minutes left, and so we wanted to open it up to you all. If you have any specific questions, again, you can put them in the chat, or you can do the raise hand feature so that we can call upon your name and you can speak. As everyone's collecting their thoughts, there is a question in the chat that says, will all dyslexia interventionists have a baseline training and certification, or will the requirements be in the bucket be less than a CALT position? Would a resource teacher qualify under this new title?
That's a great question. I know that the district has committed to certifying all of the reading interventionists to go through the CALT training. And from what I understand, we have about 80 that have already gone through the training. We have an additional 18 that have signed up for this summer's training. So we are committed to continuing the certification because the training that comes is a big value for the interventionists to know how to meet the needs of our students. So is it a requirement? No, because not all of our current interventionists are CALT certified, but we are working to get them all CALT certified.
Thank you. There was another question in the chat says, what problem has the Equity Advisory Committee been commissioned to solve?
I'd like to think that the committee is not commissioned so much as we've had our first meeting, but what the group is focused on as a first priority is identifying the areas that will be focused on for the third party equity assessment. And so that is the highest priority the group has right now. That subcommittee should be coming together in a couple of weeks, and they will bring to the fuller committee and to the public the areas after they've looked at the data. So they'll be looking at a lot of data and then identifying exactly where should the equity assessment focus.
Thank you. So while we wait for some of our participants to ask more questions, we did get a participant submit a question during their registration that says, how will Aisd track data going forward to determine achievement differences between remote and in-person students? And if I need to repeat it, please let me know.
No, thank you so much. I think that's been a really important point that we didn't even, I don't know that any of my colleagues or other school districts, which we should have, but we didn't even anticipate that we really needed to have identified how to, we disaggregate data in many different ways. This now also means we need to disaggregate data for students that are serving or being served in a virtual setting versus those that are being served in a face-to-face session. I think some of the specific issues that we need to think about are that when we move this next year to a different virtual design with a teacher dedicated to that particular model, rather than having to do two models, we may see some differences with regard to that. So we're going to continue to identify and then work to disaggregate that data. The largest issue, as many of you already know, has been the fact that because COVID has had so many start-stops, it's also, how do you know that that's the variable that has affected either success or lack thereof? So we can draw some correlations, but we also don't want to overgeneralize conclusions from single data points, but it is a very important component. That is why we know that some of our students truly have benefited, and there's some lessons learned about being able to access other courses that maybe we don't have someone to teach in person, but maybe we can utilize a virtual platform in order to teach some courses to our students that we haven't even thought of before. So there are a lot of new ways in which to use virtual instructional delivery that I think we want to work on a regular basis. There was a question, I don't want to get too far off, but I also saw
they were doing shop. I did my thing.
There was also a question about special education staffing, and I don't want to get completely too far into that, but what I do want everyone to know is Ms. Casas gave me some data just the other day. We and there's a very solid plan on how to continue accelerating the evaluations that need to be done, and there are a lot more staff members that are both employees or contracted that she now has a plan in which we'll be able to, we have sufficient staff to meet that particular portion. So we're going to be reevaluating some other areas of need as we have heard. We've certainly heard about some folks that have left and maybe some of the reasons that they've left. And so we'll be continuing to look forward to addressing some of those needs so that we can always make sure we have, as we do now, so that we have the best staff of any school district.
Thank you. So we have another question in the chat. It says, why is the enrollment block reliant on volunteers rather than paid workers? Perhaps this could be a high school student work program? So I think they're asking, why is the enrollment block? And maybe Charlotte, you can give me a little bit more specifics if you're not understanding the question. If we're not understanding the question.
It's the
go ahead, Charlotte.
The block the block that I've seen advertised asking parents to help block to help enrollment. Just my random question was, why are we doing it from volunteers that are helping work? Is it more of a community engagement thing? Or like, why would it work something better as like a program for kids that are through the Aisd?
So this is a joint, so it's a joint effort, and I'll let Dr. Mays add in just a minute, but it's a joint effort. So it's being led certainly by our staff members, and it's such a great question, Charlotte, that you just asked, but we also know that our families listen to other family members first. So it's like me needing you to say, can you tell them that you're really having great experiences at your school, and that while it's not perfect, here's some things. So it's really more about a partnership. So I don't know then that we did a good job of communicating that. It's not like, oh, we just need everybody to do this. It's, can you do this with us? Because we can go out, but parents listen to parents, right? They want to know what your experiences are. Dr. Mays, what would you like to add?
Sure. I was going to say, and it was breaking up, but I think you hit the nail right on the head. It is about community engagement. I mean, we do want to, we're all new to this community. It's important for us to engage in this work together with you all. It's important for us to connect with families and parents. We do want our families to see Dr. Elizalde out there walking the block, you know, with her nice shoes, putting in the work shoulder to shoulder with everybody else. And I know that feeling of connection is important to our superintendent, but it's also important to our entire team. Dr. Holly talks about it all the time when we talk about, you know, meeting our community, engaging our community. You know, what better way to engage our community than to go out there and work side by side together in an area that we know is of critical need for our community. And so we're excited about it. We have several partners, whether it's ACC, our PTAs, campus leadership, our board members. There's a number of different people that have signed up. We're well over 100 volunteers that want to be engaged in this work. And this is not our first or last. Well, this is going to be our first one. We have some other ones taking place too, but this won't be our last opportunity to go out and visit with families in the community and talk to them about all of the good stuff that Aisd has to offer that we want them to take advantage of.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mays. And with that, we are going to conclude this session. We appreciate everyone for taking the time to join us and ask questions and relay your concerns. This meeting was recorded, so we will be posting this recording on the website at a later date. Again, as a reminder, we will be having our community session after this, so if you'd like to join us, click on the chat. It will lead you directly to the link to get registered if you haven't done so. But thank you again, much appreciated.